But without further ado, let's dive into John chapter 2 today. I told you that we're going to be spending some time here at a miracle that everybody has heard about. You don't even have to have grown up in church or go to church. Everybody knows about water into wine. It's like the coolest punchline of a party joke, right? Like, oh yeah, one time Jesus finally did something useful, turned water into wine. You might have heard this joke. Hopefully you weren't the one making it. Okay. But I think this is one of those stories that as much as I sort of am humorous here, it's like one of those ones we can go, okay, we know how this 1 through 11 goes, so let's get to the good part where it does turn into wine, and we kind of stop actually seeing it. But I think there's something really important here for us. This is, as we go through the Gospel of John, chapter 1 was John starting, like Pastor Kurt has taught the last 2 weeks, with Jesus is God. John chapter 1, verse 1. For anybody who has told you that Jesus never claimed to be God, John chapter 1, verse 1 says, in the beginning, the Word was God. He was with God. He is God in continuance. That's the statement about who Jesus was in chapter 1. And then right at the end of chapter 1, John says to Nathanael, or Jesus says to Nathanael, you're going to see way greater things than these so far. And then from there, John is the storyteller of the signs of Jesus. Let me not tell you about who he was. Let me show you what he did and force you to deal with the signs that he is proclaiming. And so this book, this chapter here today, this story that we're looking at, can read like Jesus showed up to a wedding, his mom and his disciples were there, it was in his hometown, they run out of wine, and he performs a party trick and something kind of cool happens. But I think if that's all we take out, we kind of miss some really important things. First of all, John saying, let me show you who Jesus is, starts with where this happens. It's a pretty important and momentous moment for Jesus to now start his ministry on earth. That's what John chapter 2, verse 1 is saying is happening. And where does it happen? Not in the temple where you would expect a religious leader to sort of announce themselves. It doesn't happen in a big dramatic storm or some other time. It happens at a normal, almost routine part of life, at a wedding reception. There's family, there's celebration, there's joy. This is as normal as life gets, and then something goes wrong and the wine runs out. Now for us, that might just sound like bad hosting. Someone should just run out to Bevmo and solve the problem. But in the first century here, this was a statement about your preparation to respect those who showed up and those who have gone before you. Like there would have been this thought of like, you had one job. Don't mess this one up. This would have been like deep cultural shame that this new couple, you all, if you've been married before, you know how unsure you're about a lot of stuff. The one thing you at least got to get right is the wedding reception. This would have been a deep cultural shame and level of embarrassment that would have followed them. It would have been the story people told about them before they remembered them as people. They would have told this story. And so this is the moment that we see. But honestly, the thing is, I'm sitting here and I'm preparing. I always like to, when I preach, talk about what the prep version is like. Because you don't know. I just stand up here and yell at you for 30 minutes and then we go away. But the struggle that is sitting with this and actually going, God, what do you want us to see and hear from you this weekend? I was sitting here with this moment and I'm like, I get this. Do you feel that tension already? You got the bride and the groom, they're trying to figure it out. You got the party going well, you got the parents of both sides. And all of a sudden this story becomes a family who's trying to hold it together for appearance's sake when they know in the back room they're running out of one of the most important things. A family who's trying to hold it together for appearance's sake when they know that something vital to this going well isn't actually where it needs to be. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh shoot, this is hitting me a little bit. I'm just in the intro. This idea that life can be going and even going well according to someone or going to me, but internally I know that I'm running a little bit lower than maybe I'd like to say or admit. All of a sudden this story stopped being about whether Jesus could or couldn't turn some water into wine. It became about the real question of, man, what happens when we run out of what we are operating on? What happens when the sort of fuel that we're living life with starts to run a little bit dry? And what does Jesus have to say about that? Because the reality is we can keep the metaphorical wedding of life going all the while knowing that the wine is out in the back room. And we all have a lot of practice doing that. Look, the interesting thing is this isn't an obvious crisis even, the place where Jesus first chooses to reveal himself. Most of the people at the wedding probably didn't even know about what had happened. So the question I think for us today, I hope, is not just can Jesus really do miracles, but really a deeper level question of when what we have runs out, what does Jesus want to do when it does? But before we actually go verse by verse through this passage, I just think spending a moment to see why John has dropped this in here is important. John isn't just recounting a thing that happened. He's trying to make sure that we don't miss what it means and who Jesus is. Right at the end of chapter 1, like Pastor Kurt talked about last week, he's just finished recruiting his first 4 disciples. We've got Andrew, we've got Peter, we've got Philip, we've got Nathaniel. And these guys are starting to notice there's something different about this Jesus of Nazareth. Remember what Nathaniel said? He's like, Nazareth, can anything good come out of there? I'm not gonna say any foothills town because I'll let that leave to your own imagination. And yet they start to say things like, hey, we found the Messiah. Come and see. They say things like, Nathaniel says, you are the Son of God. And Jesus says, you're gonna see greater things than these. Right at the end of chapter 1, which then sets up us here today in chapter 2, because now John, as I said earlier, is about to start showing us, okay, what are these greater things then? And then John, in chapter 2, verse 1, and the rest of the gospel, tells more stories about signs that Jesus has performed than any other gospel of the 4 synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Notice what he doesn't call it. He doesn't call it a miracle. He calls it a sign. Now, I'll use the words interchangeably today. It means roughly the same thing. But John's choice of specific words is very precise. He uses the word sign because it's indicating he's pointing to a greater story altogether. Like when you're driving up the freeway, you see the sign that represents the exit you're going to get off on, but you're not at the exit just because you see the sign. You know that it represents where you're going, even if you're not there yet. And so as John is telling us about these things that Jesus did, he calls them signs, that what Jesus is doing on earth is indicating this larger story of God's redemptive point of the gospel in the form of Jesus. So what does this actually show us about who Jesus is? Verse 11 at the end of our passage for today tells us, check it out. It says, this, the first of his signs, Jesus did in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Here's the point of John. Here's the point of the signs that John tells us. They revealed who Jesus really is. It reveals his glory, and then we are forced to deal with how we respond to who he's said that he is. So let's read this whole passage together, and then we'll work by it piece through piece. John chapter 2, verse 1 says this. On the 3rd day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, Mary, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Woman, why do you involve me? Now, I don't know if that's actually how Jesus said it, but I can't help but read it like that when I read this. I don't know, it just happens. Woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour has not yet come. Verse 5, his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Nearby stood 6 stone jars of water of the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, and so they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you've saved the best until now. Verse 11 again. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Jumping into the passage here today, the first thing that we see is John setting the scene of where this is happening. Like we said, it's at a wedding, a family event, a celebration. Verse 1 says that Jesus is there, his mother is there, some of his disciples are there. Note that this is actually near his hometown. So this is probably a family that they were closely either in relationship with or maybe even related to. So this is a very personal and intimate thing. Jesus is personally involved in this. But as I'm sitting here yesterday, here's what I kept wanting to do. I'm studying through the week leading up to it, and then yesterday I'm trying to make sure I'm compiled it all and see what God is saying. And frankly, being open to, I've gotten this far, am I really gonna go rewrite this Jesus? That happens a lot. And I kept wanting to do this thing. I know how the story goes. The cool part happens in like verse 9. My mind kept skipping to when Jesus does the water to wine thing. And so I kept having to force myself, no. Go sit at verse 1. Go sit at verse 1. My friend, an encouragement to you. If you have read through scripture before and you feel like it's not jumping out to you, maybe, I propose, try and just sit with something. Just sit on a verse and say, God, what do you want me to see from this thing? I'm assuming that you are reading scripture, but from there, spend some time drilling down. And as I'm sitting here and I'm thinking of this, I'm like, wow, Jesus is there. Like, obviously, it says he was. This is simple, but it's a profound statement. I mean, think about this. Jesus' first sign that we have recounted, and it says that he's at a wedding, he's fully there and present. Sometimes I think that when we think about Jesus showing up, we think about dramatic moments in life that we can think back to. We think about hospital rooms, we think about big moments, funerals, life crises. But Jesus' first sign happens in the most ordinary of life moment, and then verse 3 happens, when the wine was gone, a statement that starts to build the tension for us. Again, this isn't just about drinks. This is a family who's trying to hold it together when it's starting to go south. Knowing that most people at the wedding probably didn't even know what was going on. The wedding was still going, the music was still playing, people are still dancing, everybody seems to still be having a good time, and there's this group of people that has this thing going on that no one else knows about behind the scenes. And this is, once again, a little bit too real for my comfort, is most of the time what happens when I'm studying and preparing, is how much of my life is framed around stuff that's going on that no one else knows about. Because most people don't blow up in a moment. You just run dry over time. You know, there's so many times in my life, because I think about this idea that some of the times the most dangerous things, for me at least, is my life can become about productivity, about momentum, about the things that are getting done, all the while masking the depletion that I might be walking around with. You know, I'm husband and father and leader of church, and there's a team, and God's doing amazing things, and like this and this and this and this, and we're productive, and people look and go, man, it's going great. It's going amazing. Look at all this stuff. And I'm like, you're right. But there's been stretches in my life, and I know there has been for you too, when that might be true on the outside, but inside you're running on fumes. You haven't taken the time to actually refill in so long, you've forgotten what it's like to not play the part instead of live the life. Now, I'm not making any statements about you, but just know this moment, the wedding is still functioning, but it's not fine, is it? But notice what is at the very beginning of this. Before the solution, before the miracle, before it all works out in the end. I know we all want the Disney movie. Jesus is there. He is present with them before he's done anything yet. My friend, someone needs to hear in here today. I don't know what you're carrying around that causes you to feel like you're running a little bit low, but just know, before Jesus has done anything to solve that problem, he is present with you. This is the quiet stuff, the private stuff. Slow burnout that you feel from walking into the job day after day when it stopped bringing any kind of joy years ago. The marriage tension that nobody knows about and you're not really sure who or how to bring it up, or the faith that just starts to feel a little bit thin. It's in these moments where Jesus steps in and is present with us. As Eugene Peterson once wrote, man, God is present sometimes where we least expect it. And as usual, in my life, that's oftentimes in the least dramatic of moments. It's in the day-to-day routine of life. And oftentimes what I find is Jesus is already there long before I'm honest enough to admit there's even a problem. And so in each of these sections, as I'm coming through teaching today, as usual, I'm just going to share about my story and how I'm hoping and praying that maybe something about what God has shown me and the journey that I'm on with following him will hit you by me saying it out loud. It's as simple as that most of the time. And in each of these sections, I want to wrap it up with not just a practical application, but a challenge question. Because what my prayer is that you might hear something this morning that ticks your interest, or, ooh, man, he didn't know he was talking to me. But what I really hope is you actually write these down. I'll have a question for each section, and I want you to spend some time this week actually marinating on this question and allowing God to do what he's gonna do in and through you because of it. Here's the first challenge question I have for you. What in your life looks fine from the outside, but you know it's running dry underneath? What in your life looks fine from the outside, but you know it's running dry underneath? Because honestly, pretending it's fine and being fine are not the same thing. The story moves from where Jesus is and how present he is to what Mary does now. Mary just doesn't notice the problem. She just brings it straight to Jesus. Verse 3 says, they have no more wine. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. That's it. There's no speech. There's no polished prayer. There's no plan already prepared. There's just an honest need, and she names it and she brings it to Jesus, fully expecting that Jesus is gonna handle it. She doesn't pretend or try and fix it first. And I was challenged. This is prayer before prayer became a concept, my friends. Before prayer was a church word and a thing we do, it was a reality that she lived. My encouragement for us today and challenge. When was the last time you prayed a prayer where you noticed the need and you brought it directly to Jesus? I think sometimes true prayer is not, we know big words and we don't know how to say all the things right. Oftentimes we just don't think about it. It's not the first thing that we go to. But I think, man, true prayer in my life starts to show up and build my faith when I stop pretending about what I could make happen and I start to tell the truth about what is right now. And they usually only take 2 or 3 words in the form of a prayer. God, I'm angry right now. That's not fair. God, I'm a little afraid. I don't know what the next part of the journey looks like. God, I don't know what to do here. I'm telling you, sometimes the simplest prayers not only start to feel a lot like the psalmist, they connect us to the heart of God in a way that has no pretense and no solution yet. It just is. But I think sometimes one of the easiest things, the traps for us, is to try and solve everything before we bring it to Jesus first. Look, I like plans. I like problem solving. I'm a solutions-oriented guy. And sometimes if I'm not careful, prayer can accidentally be the last resort and not the first step. This just happened to me this last week. I was flying home from Atlanta cross country. Side note, never take Southwest across the country. Just don't do it. The rates aren't even that good anymore anyway. I don't even know what the point is. They got 27 boarding groups. If you work for Southwest, come see me. I have some thoughts. And I'm sitting there. I'm trying to board my flight. I'm refreshing my app, and I see, oh, great. The second leg through Dallas is delayed. Fine. It's going to be fine. An hour late. Okay, just going to get home a little later. I'm sitting there. I'm like, no one's here. No one's boarding. We're 30 minutes past. We end up an hour late on that first leg. And I'm like, that's all right. An hour late. We're actually on time, ironically. I'm sitting there and I'm we're about to get on the plane. I refresh one more time. And for the first time in my life, I thought, no, it's on time. The second leg went from an hour late. All of a sudden it turns green. It's on time. And I was like, why do you have to be on time? Only time I've ever thought this. The problem with this is now the second leg, the doors were closing at the minute I was supposed to now be landing. I'm like, well, that's not gonna work out great. So I get on the plane, I'm like, look out, I got stuff to do. Sit down, I start Googling, I'm like, okay, what other airlines are coming through here? Okay, it's the last flight in, who else can I do? What else can I do? I can't figure it out. Wi-Fi is starting to get slowed down because we're taking off. So I text my wife, Courtney. I'm like, babe, stop putting the girls to sleep. We gotta figure this out. There's 4-alarm fire. We're gonna figure out what's going on here. She's looking, she's like, I don't see anything, I don't think. Have you talked to the attendant? I'm like, twice, she already knows my name. We're friends, kind of, if she can help me figure this problem out. I'm like, oh man, this is crazy. I sit down and I just keep refreshing. And I kept refreshing. And then literally in there, I'm sitting there, I'm so frustrated. This is not hard, just get me home. And it was then at that moment, I'm telling on myself, fully honest, when I went, I should probably pray about this. Literally the thought I had in those exact words. And in that moment, I was a little embarrassed by myself. You can be embarrassed by yourself. And I was like, hey God, I've done a lot of work already. Why was I there? Because I knew that I had done everything I could. I'd exhausted my plans, and then I think of Jesus at that moment. Here's what I didn't know. It's kind of cool. I find out afterwards that when I sent the text to my wife, she was in the middle of getting our girls ready, and Evie, my 10-year-old, was like, we should pray for them. Courtney's like, that's a great idea. And I'm like, my kids are way more faithful to me. Thank you. Thank you, God. It's good. And so they end up praying for two things. One, God, would you help Daddy make his flight, which I actually did somehow. I don't know why they were still loading, but they were. It was amazing. Got on. And they prayed for a little extra, probably something I wouldn't even have asked for. They said, would you just have something really cool happen, because Daddy's probably really stressed out, that would just make it really fun for him. Didn't know about this until yesterday as I was prepping this. So I walk onto the plane and I'm boarding, and I'm literally right behind one of my favorite people in the world. His name's Reggie Christensen. He's the head baseball coach at Sacramento State, someone who's shaped my life more than most anybody in my life. And the entire Sac State baseball team was just coming back from a series at UT Arlington, and they were on the same flight. I got to sit next to him and talk about life and Jesus and what matters in life most. What a gift that I didn't even know about. But the reality of this is, my last resort was the simplest of things. Mary does the exact opposite. She doesn't manage first and decide to pray later. She just sees the problem and she brings it to Jesus. Jesus responds in verse 4, woman, why do you involve me? My hour's not yet come. If I said that to my mom growing up, it wouldn't have gone great. Mary's got a lot of patience. Look, Jesus isn't being rude here. What he's trying to do is make something clear. That he is not going to be pressured by the needs of men in the moment. He's already in this first sign indicating that he is working on a different kind of plan. God's plan of redemption for humanity through him on the earth that leads all the way up to the cross and beyond. This is not the pressure that's going to make me move. And yet, this idea of bringing something to Jesus is hard for us. Because usually what we want is, Jesus, I need you to fix this. And in my way, now, and preferably without too much discomfort. Okay, maybe I'm just telling on myself. What we really want is help without loss of control. But so often, at least in my journey of learning what it means to follow Jesus, that ain't how it works. Mary just brings the problem to Jesus, and then she doesn't just stand there and manage the outcomes. She brings the problem to the feet of Jesus and grows her trust and expectation in him that he is going to be the one who knows what the next step is from there. Simply stated, prayer brings the problem to Jesus, and then trust lets Jesus decide what happens next. My challenge for this second section is, what are you trying to solve before you bring it to Jesus? What are you exhausting every avenue, every networking conversation, everything that you've got? And the last thing you've actually thought to do, like me on the flight, was the simplest of all. Mary then turns to the servants in verse 5 and she says, do whatever he tells you. I love this. He just said, it's not my time. Don't push me. She's like, I hear you. Do whatever he tells you. I'm like, I get Mary, let's go. What is going on here? She tells him basically, do it anyway. She says, don't wait until it makes sense. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until you have the full plan, because it's probably going to sound a little bit like you didn't expect. Do whatever he tells you. Man, sometimes I think that like learning to follow Jesus, we can make so complicated. Do you listen to the right podcast? Do you watch the right YouTube sermon replay? Do you have the right study Bible with the cool margins on the side and the large text because no one wants to read it like this? Do you have regular deep conversations over coffee? Pour over, of course, because it's how God prefers it. With deep conversations about transubstantiation and your position on the Eucharist. Someone just said, is that English? No, it's Latin. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad. I love that stuff. And we live in such a beautiful time and age where we have access to resources like we never have before. But sometimes I think that we can get so focused on all the tools and the check boxes of what it means to go then be in pursuit of Jesus, we can miss the simplest things there are. Being a disciple in Jesus' day, the literal disciples, they were called that. Why? They didn't do anything fancy. All they did was take the risk of leaving everything and walk after him, like literally walk with him. And they got called disciples. Today we call that discipleship. It's a process of learning to follow Jesus. And right here in this moment, we see like the concept of discipleship distilled down into one sentence, simple, clear, and profoundly challenging. Do whatever he tells you. And now the story shifts because it's one thing to bring the problem to Jesus. When we do think of that, it's a whole nother thing to actually do what he says. See, obedience is where it starts to get uncomfortable, my friends. Verse 6, nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing. That detail isn't random. John puts it there on purpose. We'll come back to it in a bit. Jesus says, fill the jars with water, which has to feel strange. Can you imagine? These guys don't know who Jesus is. Maybe they do. They're like, oh, good. He can solve our wine problem. Great. Does he have like a cart outside that we didn't see with more wine in it? And then Jesus is like, hey, go fill these pots with water. Like sometimes we read these parts of scripture and we're like, they fully knew. Because we know. So they knew. No, they didn't. They were just guys who Mary randomly said, do whatever he says. And clearly he said, I'm not interested. And then he tells us to go put water in the jars. Can you imagine being one of those guys? Their job is on the line. Like, if we don't help fix the problem, this is gonna be a problem for us. And these jars are huge, 20 to 30 gallon each stone jars. Like hopefully they had a cistern in the courtyard, but chances are these guys were hoofing a bucket down outside the city and coming back. These are probably small buckets. That's a lot of trips. That's just good old-fashioned hard physical labor. That doesn't sound like the recipe for miracle stuff. Can you imagine these guys? I'd be like, dude, how is that gonna help us solve the wine problem, man? Like water is not what we need. This seems to be the opposite of miraculous. And look what John tells us they do. They don't just go fill them up. It says they filled them to the brim. They're not halfway in. They're not cutting a corner to say it's full enough. They fill it all the way up. But notice what happens. Jesus tells them to draw some water out and take it to the master of the banquet. Now it gets really uncomfortable. Okay, it's one thing to follow your harebrained instruction over here, man, and like fill up these jars with water, which is not solving the problem. You're asking me to take some of this clearly water, because we put it in, to the guy who's expecting wine, and that's on me. Do you feel how weird and like human this is in this moment? What are you asking us to do right now, Jesus? Because the servants know exactly what's in those jars. And they're carrying what looks like the wrong thing to the guy in charge. That takes some trust. Notice what they didn't get? They didn't get an explanation, did they? Hey, here's how it's gonna work out. I'm Jesus, by the way, nice to meet you. I'm gonna do a miracle right now. It's gonna be sweet. You're gonna be a part of it. People talk about you centuries from now. I didn't catch any of that. All he gives them is one instruction. Take some water out of there and take it to him. Woo. Sometimes I think this is where so many of us get stuck. We want an explanation first. Jesus, it will be so much easier to do risky things on behalf of you if you're good enough to give me the direction we're going, because then I can chart a course. But what he usually gives me, just speaking for myself here, is the challenge of obedience first. And there's been so many moments in my life when I ask God, would you just give me the 10-year plan, please? It would make things so much easier. Because if I didn't have to worry about all the peripheral stuff and I knew where you wanted me to go and what you'd line up for the workout, it's gonna be so much better. Okay, fine, God, it's the age of AI. 10 years seems like a long time frame. How about 3 years? Can we do a 3-year plan? No? 12-week sprint? Can we settle on a 12-week sprint here? It's gonna make things so much easier. And in those moments, if I'm truly honest with myself, if I actually stop talking for a moment and I listen to what I've asked for him to tell me, it usually sounds like something I least expect. It's not where I'm going. It's, hey, you know that conversation I've been putting on your heart in random times for a while? I think it's time for you to have that one now. Reset. Try it again. All right, God, that's where we're going. I'm gonna need you to tell me how to get there. Hey, you know that conversation that I've been keep putting on your heart? I think it's time for you to have it. You make that phone call. And I'm like, God, that doesn't have any bearing. That has nothing to do with where I need to go. Can you help me go where I need to go? And he's like, here's this thing that seemingly has nothing to do with the solution you're asking me for. Are you gonna take the next step? See, but think about it from the servant's perspective. They got to experience this miracle on the side of obedience. Most of the people that were at the wedding, they didn't even know this happened. They didn't get to experience what Jesus just did. It was only the guys who thought they were about to lose their job and they were seemingly risking it all to do something that seemed to make no sense for the problem that they had at hand to solve. And yet because they just obeyed, they filled, they carried, and they delivered. Somewhere in that filling and that carrying and that delivering, Jesus showed up and worked in a way they never could have imagined, and then they got to experience. I bet these guys were some of the most all-in pursuers of Jesus afterwards, because how could you not have been? To go from the level of, I can't believe I'm doing this is crazy, to, holy smokes, how did that happen? My friends, what if your life in pursuit of Jesus is stale because the last time you decided to take that step was so long ago, you barely remember what the risk feels like? He's not asking you to have the plan. In fact, if you had the plan, we would be good enough to not end up there. What he's asking you to do is take the next step. Discipleship doesn't have to be that complex. Just do what he tells you. 20th century preacher Oswald Chambers said once, faith never knows where it's being led, but it loves and knows the one who is leading. This is what he says makes it so challenging though. Because maybe we do remember to pray and we talk and we process and we try and figure out, we ask God for help and then he gives us the next step. And then suddenly actually what we want is more information. Jesus, tell me how to do it. And Jesus says, forgive. And all of a sudden we want to guarantee that it will go well. Jesus, give me the next step. I want to know what to do. And Jesus says, confess. And we want to know that if we do, no one will think of us differently. Jesus, give me the next step. And he says to apologize. And all of a sudden we want them to go first. Jesus says, take the next step. And we say, only if I have the full map will I take that kind of risk for you. But these servants don't get the map. They just get an instruction and they do it. If I'm willing to be honest with us this morning and myself first, a lot of us want, or dare I say, think that we deserve for Jesus to explain himself first before we will actually go there. So often he's just telling us to take the next step. Challenge for this section, where are you waiting for more clarity when Jesus has already made the next step clear? Where are you asking him for more clarity when he already told you what the next step is? Because sometimes, at least in my story, I'm praying about it as just a spiritual way of saying, I don't want to do it. Where are you waiting for more clarity when he's already made the next step clear? The servants obey, they fill, they draw, they carry, and then some start to see what Jesus has done. Verse 9 tells us that the master of the banquet, he tastes the water that's been turned into wine. Now the point of this whole story, this first sign starts to get clear. Yes, Jesus provides. The shortage is real. He meets a need. But man, I think John again is trying to get us to see this bigger picture. The master says, everyone brings out the good wine first and then the bad wine later. But he says, you have saved the best until now. Jesus doesn't just receive a compliment here. Jesus doesn't just help them avoid the embarrassment. No, he actually brings something altogether different that didn't exist before. Not barely enough or just survival, but abundance, the highest quality that they weren't even asking for. This has been such a hard lesson for me to learn because so much of my upbringing was about doing the right moves so that I would feel as if I earned and needed the love of Jesus. I never called it this because I didn't know how to do it that, but that's how I lived. Try harder, look cleaner, perform better, keep the outside looking right. But eventually I've gotten to a place, and I hope you have too, where you realize you could do all the right moves and still miss what Jesus is up to. There's a reason why he used these jars. These good Jewish family would have realized these are the ceremonial washing jars. We got this from Moses and the law, and it's our appearance upkeep by washing our hands that makes us worthy of the love of God. Jesus leans into that and says, I know, but I'm here so that you can have a whole different kind of life and to live an abundant life that you couldn't have created on your own. So I'm gonna use what you thought was a means to an end and upend it all completely. Tim Keller always used to say, the gospel isn't about making bad people good, it's about causing dead people to come to life. Jesus came to earth, he starts this first sign, and already he's saying, I'm doing a whole different thing. I'm not just gonna solve the issue of the wine, I'm gonna show you that I'm here to provide a life that's altogether different, that you didn't have the ability to create on your own. Jesus wants us to see him, to trust him, to know him, to be changed from the inside out by him. My last challenge is this. Are you asking Jesus to help you keep the appearances together, or are you desperate for him to make you new? No condemnation, just a question. I hope I've indicated enough that these are questions for myself first. Could you imagine, just with me for a minute, what your life would be like if you fully were aware of how present Jesus is with you every day in all the things that you carry around? He's not waiting for you to show up to small group or to church in order for that to become true. He's with you before anything else has happened yet. What would it be like if every time you encountered an issue before you went into problem-solving mode, you just brought it to Jesus? Jesus, I don't know if you're gonna have anything to do with solving this like I think it needs to happen, but here it is, and trust that he's got the rest. And then when he shows up, maybe in a way that's nothing like you expected, if we started to become a group of people who does what he tells us to do, simple next steps of obedience, could you imagine the kind of revival that would be unleashed on those that we pray for and care for most? So that we can start to learn the most important lesson of all. Jesus didn't come to clean up your external appearance. He came to change you, give you new life, so that you can live an abundance in a way that you couldn't have worked hard enough to create on your own. Jesus, we thank you so much for this word today from John. God, thank you so much that we aren't focusing so much on the party trick that we miss you in the midst of it. God, I pray that this will be a group of people who are willing to take the next instruction and act on it. God, I pray that there will be an outpouring of text messages sent, of phone calls made, of conversations had that come directly out of this, because the next step towards where you want us to go, it so often doesn't look like what I think it should. God, would you not let us be comfortable? Instead, God, would you become so present that we couldn't help but respond with, yeah, I'm in for that. We love you, Jesus. We need you. Make us new. It's your name we pray.